And we are live. Welcome back to MicroConf On Air. This is a show where we live stream every other Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And we do it for about 30 minutes. We cover topics related to building and growing ambitious SaaS startups. These are the startups that bring us freedom and purpose and allow us to maintain healthy relationships while also being incredibly motivated and excited about what we are working on every day. So thanks so much for joining me again this week. I have a great guest who's going to be joining me in a minute, Corey Haines. You may have heard of him as the founder of Swipefiles, or you've probably seen him on the Twitters. If you have any questions for Corey Haines about marketing, about growth, he's built a pretty incredible business on, essentially an email newsletter, feel free to pipe them into the MicroConf On Air channel in MicroConf Connect, or you can put them as in the chat, YouTube chat. MicroConfConnect.com. If you're not already in there, we have almost 3,000 founders and aspiring bootstrapped SaaS founders, and it's free and it's moderated, and the community it's just really a great place to be, to hang out and to get advice and give advice. So with that, we're going to be talking today about the Stairstep Approach in action. And again, my guest is Corey Haines. On Twitter, he is Corey Haines CO. He's the founder of Swipefiles. He's been a SaaS marketer and a growth expert for many years. He currently is the marketing lead for Derek Reimer's SavvyCal, who, I've mentioned SavvyCal many times on the show. He was the first marketing hire at Baremetrics and Cordial. He's an investor and advisor to more than 10 B2B SaaS companies. So join me in welcoming Corey Haines to the show. Sir,
hello.
There he is.
Good.
A round of applause. A nice warm MicroConf welcome, as I say MicroConf. Don't worry, there are people watching. Even though it's just you and I. It's
of course,
it's good energy. Cool. So yeah, let's. I want to talk about a couple things today. The questions will start pouring in, and we'll interrupt when those do. But I like this idea of, you've kind of stair-stepped your way up. I think most folks listening know the Stairstep Approach to bootstrapping. I've talked about starting small, starting simple, and then building on top of that as you gain experience, as you gain revenue, as you gain the confidence, all these things. And so it feels like Swipefiles may, on its own be a stair step in action. Oftentimes I talk about building one small product early on in an ecosystem like Shopify or Heroku or WordPress, and then usually you can't make a full-time living off of those. And then oftentimes you get 2 or 3 of those. Hey, now I buy out my time and now I have the freedom to kind of work on whatever I want, which in my world usually is bootstrapping, or mostly bootstrapping a SaaS company. But you've done it a little differently. And I think it's, an equally viable approach. I think to start, let's talk about Swipefiles. So swipefiles.com if folks want to check it out. Can you tell us, I can try to describe it, but there's a lot to it. And I just want to make sure that you cover it so folks understand what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Swipefiles is, on the front end, what people get for free is a newsletter that helps you with SaaS marketing. So I share all sorts of case studies and tactics and stories from my experiences. And then the back end is a membership, a product, which is essentially a community, a collection of courses. I do live office hours, and then access to me for all things SaaS marketing and growth to help you with your business. Since it's what I've sort of known and breathed and done for the last couple of years, now I just get to do that forever. And there's a direct access to me through all that.
Not a bad living. And so you're pretty public about numbers. You have on the homepage that there are almost 7,400 SaaS founders and marketers on the free list. Hey, Pablo. And then when I click on the membership link, you have your MRR down at the bottom of that page. And I think you and I were just talking offline before we started that MRR is a little out of date. Do you want to tell folks how much you're making from Swipefiles?
Yeah, so the MRR right there is now today. I need to update it. We're just talking about how it's make.com, but I need to update a formula in there. Didn't get around to it before this interview, but hovers around 5,000 to 5,500 a month. So MRR. There's also other revenue from sponsorships, which is about equally as much. And then there's also affiliates, and I'll do sort of some random consulting stuff here and there. There used to be like a coaching component, which I since kind of ramped down because I figured out I'm actually not much of a coach, not a huge fit for my strengths. But altogether, it does around $120,000 a year total.
Good for you. And so has that allowed you, I mean, that's a full-time living in most places in the world. I know you're in a little more expensive place than many of us living in California, but would that allow you to essentially go full-time and, not have to work a day job?
Yeah. I mean, as of literally 2 months ago in December, I think is when I hit sort of default alive. There are expenses in there and there's taxes and all that jazz. And so it's still pretty much like ramen profitable for San Diego, California, which is a high cost living area. And, account for vacations and upgrades and things like that. So, but it does unlock my time. Like I can say that it's default alive and that if I really wanted to or needed to, Swipefiles could be like the sole source of income. The only challenge with that, of course, is cash flow. And so it ebbs and flows, and some months it'll be great and there's 10, 15 grand coming through the door. Other months there's 2 or 3,000 and it's like, oh, that's weird. But it's just the difference in billing schedules, right? And when people sign up and how many new people come through the door that month. But unlocks my time and pays for my living.
Yeah, that's great. And I would also venture to say that I think it will be to your benefit to continue to do things like you're doing with Derek on SavvyCal, because it keeps you close to the metal. And, I have to do this with Tiny Seed, right? I'm no longer a founder of a SaaS company because I sold Drip 6 years ago now. And I absolutely felt myself drifting away from that internal deep founder knowledge until I started, investing and advising in the Tiny Seed companies. And I feel like SavvyCal or, whatever gigs you pick up as a SaaS marketer, I think will keep your chops up, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, my relationship with Derek has been awesome, and just the opportunity to be able to work with him. I sort of see SavvyCal a little bit selfishly as kind of my playground where I get to test different things that I talk about or that I see other people do. And now I get to actually go put it into action and then use that as a case study to share later for Swipefiles and for members, and maybe as a newsletter edition later on, or just something I can use as material for what I'm teaching or building a new course around. And so it's absolutely. And it's also just great practice for me, speaking about the Stairstep approach, for eventually when I get to a SaaS of my own, then I have a lot of at-bats, a lot of reps, a lot of things that I can draw from. Even from like a year ago, I would say that my sort of experience and like the way that I see SaaS marketing and growing a SaaS business is, every day kind of progresses and you get 1% better. But then like looking back now from a year, I was like, man, I didn't know anything, right? It's like always you look back a year and you're like, I was so naive, I was so ignorant. But now I get to take all these and put them into practice for myself. And so today, working on a couple of small SaaS side projects, that's sort of been always my end game. Of course, with the Stairstep approach sort of in mind of, okay, each one of these things is going to be something that will eventually help me get to, the last step or the top of the ladder, which for me is being in SaaS full time.
Mm-hmm. And this is a great way to do it. So let's talk. I think we have like 3 or 4 steps that you took along the way. And I have some notes here that I think you and producer Xander were talking about that'll kind of lead us through. But was the first thing that you did was creating a couple of courses to kind of encapsulate your marketing knowledge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was kind of my first app ad. Actually, the very first one was Hey Marketers, which is the job board, which funnily enough, I actually reacquired after I sold the majority stake of it in November of 2020, I think it was. And so the job board was kind of one, I wouldn't recommend that be people's first step per se, because the challenge that I figured out very quickly was that you're doing 2 products and you're doing 2 marketing for each side of the marketplace. So for the companies hiring and then for the people looking for jobs. And that's actually why I ended up selling it. Reacquiring was a whole different story because I was in a different place and actually could kind of reincorporate it back into the Swipefiles brand and umbrella. And I sort of never stopped doing a lot of the helping with recruiting and helping make opportunities for marketing roles. But that was the first at-bat that I had. But yeah, the first, I would say, like step that I took was creating those courses. So I first created mental models for marketing. And again, that was it was just with my very meager at the time, 1,000 people, 1,000 follower Twitter list. And it was one channel, one product, a one-time sale. Let's just see what I can do with this. And I was actually, that was kind of a life-changing moment for me, especially with that first one, because I had very low expectations of, all right, I just need to get something out there. It might be a slow burn. I'll just, experiment. And when launching within the first week, it had made $10,000. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This is real. This is real money, and I showed my wife, and that inspired a lot of confidence with her, and sort of just taught me to like, oh yeah, I can do this for myself, or like, there's a lot more things that I can do. It kind of opened my eyes, because a marketer was just making a couple $100 a month, and it was doing okay, but it was kind of a struggle, and it was a grind in a lot of ways. This was different. It was with an existing audience. I already had a one-time sale, something that was very near and dear to my heart that I could talk about all day long. And so then I created another one, Refactoring Growth, which is now the 5 factors of growth, just to make things a little bit more descriptive. And same deal, within the first week, about 15 grand in revenue. And then both of those combined, I was like, I think I can do more of these like info products, things that really help the type of people I want to serve, which are SaaS founders and marketers. But also, since I can't code and I'm not a programmer, not a designer, those are the only options I can have, right? Again, like you said, I'm not going to go build a Shopify app. I'm not going to go build a little Chrome extension because I can't. So I'm just going to do with what I can, do the most with what I can, and build info products.
Yep. And that's, I believe I'm going to my blog post right now. Yes, it says oh no, it's a lot of software, but in some of the instances when I talk about the Stairstep approach, I specifically call out, you could write a book, you can write an ebook, you can do a video course, you can do, audio, you can do WordPress, Shopify, Heroku, so some of it's software and some of it's not. I believe I've updated the post itself to be more focused on software, just because that's really, I'm really all in on SaaS at the moment, but so I want to hear next. So that was your first step then, is these courses, it's kind of a one-time big push, hey, 10, 15 grand, and then it kind of trickles out. And it does, because I've done courses too, and they're amazing. And then longer term, it's always like, I'm on a hamster wheel now. I got to keep creating courses. And so we have some questions I want to jump to, and then I want to come back to your story and find out, okay, how'd you get, because now you're talking MRR about Swipefiles. So somewhere you made a couple steps there. First question is from Pablo on YouTube. And he says, now that you're wiser, you said, you get getting 1% smarter every day in essence. He says, are there SaaS ideas that you wouldn't delve into, or that you wouldn't tackle now that you know what you know?
I think
two-sided marketplace.
Right.
Two-sided marketplace for me. Yeah.
Totally. I think that's sort of a given. On the product and the marketing side, I'll speak to both of those. For the product side, again, I think that, you should know what you're getting yourself into. Like, do you have some sort of expertise, or do you feel the pain personally? But also, I think there are some markets like you've talked about, Rob. I'm just basically just going to regurgitate other things that you've said. Is there are some product categories, especially, that just like they need VC, and I personally don't want to take any VC. I'm not like anti, but just for me and my background, my goals, I want to go bootstrapped or sort of very lean and fun strapping. And so thinking about the product itself, what are the things that sort of price you out, and avoiding the things that are too big of a bite for you, and maybe that are just like the wrong category if you're building a bootstrap SaaS business. On the marketing side, especially too, the way that I think about it is what are the channels that can grow this business from the get-go? Can I scope that out beforehand? Are there a lot of unknowns? What are the channels? I think especially too, like for me, I'm not super interested in growing a SaaS business primarily through sales. I'm an introvert. I'm a marketer. I like things that scale and that can be reused and that are sort of async. Meetings and just talking with people and like a sales function, which is very monotonous and repetitive, would just be soul-sucking for me. I'm not saying it's bad. It's right for a lot of other people. And again, some SaaS products and the customers that you sell to will require a very heavy sales function and sales motion. So I wouldn't go into a SaaS business that would require that to be the primary one. Of course, you're going to have like some inbound sales, and in the early days, you kind of just want to like scrape and claw your way to every extra dollar and every customer that you can get. And so you want to do some sales and, mix some sales with like customer development essentially early on. But today I wouldn't do a SaaS business that, is outside of like a product category of that would require VC, or it's just outside of like my expertise. And I also wouldn't do one that would require a marketing channel or a sales channel that I'm not comfortable with, or that doesn't suit sort of what I'd like to do.
Yeah. And I think those are great answers. And I always struggle with this question because I can give some general ones of like, well, maybe don't go B2C, or like B2 prosumer is going to have a high churn, and all that's true. But I often come back to like, there's a lot of it that's personal. Like you personally don't want to do a sales driven org, even if, sales driven orgs can grow really quickly, but for you, it's not interesting, right? And so for me, similarly, like if I were to launch another SaaS, I wouldn't want to work with like a customer group that I wasn't super fired up to work with. So that there's a reason that I run Tiny Seed and MicroConf On Startups for the rest of us, because I love hanging around ambitious founders. I personally would struggle to start we've funded companies with Tiny Seed that are like selling to home improvement contractors or electrical contractors. And it's like, that's cool. I was an electrician for a while, but I personally don't have an affinity to that market. And I would thus get bored with the business personally at this point, And we have another question from Spencer, MicroConf Connect. He says, Corey, did you ever work a full-time job? Where did you acquire your marketing skills?
Yeah, so my first full-time gig was with Cordial. It was the first marketing hire there, and sort of worked myself up as an intern all the way to full-time hire, and then all the way to a content marketing manager. And then my second gig was with Barometrics. Those are both, again, playgrounds for me. I sort of say that I was paid to learn. Being the first time marketing hire, I think especially, you're given a lot of freedom and autonomy. You can make mistakes. You can test things out. You're going to have like a broad swath of skills that you have to acquire and just things you're going to have to tackle in general. Whereas if I were to start with like an Airbnb or a Salesforce, you're going to be hyper specialized, right? And you're just like going to be very, very in your lane, to use corporate speak, is you're only going to be doing a very small subset of skills and responsibilities. So I think just being able to work at startups, being an early marketing hire, and also just being like more of a generalist and in a generalist position allowed me to, really just to not be like a jack of all trades, master of none, but really to be a jack of all trades and then like a master of a couple of things, and to figure out what I actually did like to do. Even when I started at Cordial, I started as an intern, they were just throwing stuff left and right at me like, hey, we need to test some LinkedIn ads, and we need to sponsor this conference, and we're going to host a cocktail party up in Santa Monica, and how do we need to drive people over there? And I just like figure it out. And I also figured out very quickly the things that I don't like doing. Like events to me are the bane of my existence. And it's just all the things that I don't like about being detail oriented and everything being very time bound and on a schedule and a deadline. And, but I figured out other things like I really love content. I really love SEO. I really love performance marketing. I really love co-marketing and partnerships. And so being a generalist, I was able to also figure out what I don't like to do. But I also had the affordance, I would say the generosity of managers just to be able to kind of go and test and build a broad swath of skills.
Getting paid to learn is awesome. Those are great roles. I tell like aspiring founders or folks who say, how can I learn to program, or how can I learn to market, right? I say, try to find a job at a small company where you have a lot of autonomy. Because if you go to a Fortune 1000 company and do marketing, you're going to do one thing and you're going to do a shitload of it. You're going to write a lot of content, and you're not going to edit content. You're not going to strategize what content. You're going to be kind of handed an assignment and you can do that over and over. If you're doing pay-per-click, Google ads, that's all you're going to do. You're going to go knee deep in that, that's not bad, but you don't get the exposure to find out what you like, what you don't like. So I want to get back to your story. It looks like, all right, so cool. So no more questions right now. Folks, if you have more questions for Corey, please do post them to YouTube or MicroConf Connect. So step one of the stair step for you was basically building these courses, this one-time revenue. And then step two was what got you your first 1,000 email subscribers. So you started writing teardowns of landing pages, emails, and ads. You want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so the next project, kind of just going one after the other, trying to get my reps in from mental models for marketing to the 5 factors of growth. Then I was like, well, I want to have something now that has some sort of recurring revenue. So I still knew kind of like trying to go up to the next step. I knew there's probably still going to be like one channel-ish, but I also want to diversify away from just being Twitter and also have like a more owned channel, which I talk a lot about these days, which is like, an email list is probably the most valuable thing, the most valuable marketing asset you can have. But I also wanted something with a recurring sale. So not just a one-time sale, but also recurring revenue. At that time, I think that was, January, February of 2021. Actually, no, that was 2020. right in the middle of the pandemic. I also wanted you never know what was going to happen during the pandemic. So I also just wanted to like get something out there just to have another kind of diversify another income stream. But that was when newsletters and communities were really taking off. So I was like, I think I'm going to try to take a couple stabs here. I'm going to start with a newsletter, later get to a community. So I started doing these kind of weekly teardowns of landing pages, ads, emails, mainly a lot of SaaS companies, but some other things kind of, put in there. Not trying to think too much about like, what's my overall strategy here, more just trying to get the reps in and do these weekly teardowns. So I got the first 1,000 subscribers that way. I think I ended up doing about 42 consecutively, week after week. So almost a full year of doing those teardowns. And then I started a community for marketers, or just around marketing in general. I was one of the early users of Circle, which is a common platform now used for communities. And that was allowed me to get like the first 100 customers, like recurring, members, essentially, really subscriptions, right? And my first kind of taste at recurring revenue.
Very nice. And I'm just about to do step 3, and we got another question. So this is great. Will on MicroConf Connect, he says, I feel that a lot of times I come across case studies of startups selling to other startups, or the old course builder marketing a course on creating and marketing a course. I like to say, teaching people how to make money online by teaching people how to make money online, but that thing. But Will's question is, what advice would you have to someone who is a lone marketer for a small insurance agency or a company that makes legal software, basically marketing to companies that aren't buying on Twitter or aren't as active online?
Well, this gets really kind of in the weeds on marketing strategy. Of course, there's no one size fits all. To be as prescriptive as possible, really what you want to do is you want to kind of go through like an influence mapping exercise where you're trying to figure out what are all the things, the channels, the people, the sources of content that your target market pays attention to, where they give their time and energy and attention. Where do their eyeballs go? What do they spend time online on their phone or on their desktop, researching, learning, educating themselves, hanging out online? Where are the digital watering holes, as it were, of sort of where you can find those types of people? And then how do you find ways to get in front of them in an authentic and compelling way, right? And so maybe there's a couple of, online publications or magazines, or I'm trying to like speak in a little bit like, old school kind of marketing tactics. If it's maybe like an older, more analog industry, maybe like insurance or insurance tech, maybe not, right? But just think about what are all the things that they pay attention to. A really easy way to do that is you can run a survey to your existing customers if you have some. You can also just do some online sleuthing, looking through, doing Google searches and asking friends of friends. Kind of just doing research online of where these people hang out, what sort of, even doing like keyword research in a tool like Ahrefs or Ubersuggest, typing in keywords like, insurance, tech, or like common keywords of what people would search for. So how to do X, Y, and Z that's related to your industry, or even just doing video calls with those customers or with, people, even like podcasters in the industry or people who are influencers or content creators in that space. They normally have, speaking from experience, a good kind of lay of the land and good perspective and opinions about who all the players are, what people care about, what other source of content or influences are in the market that you can use to tap into. And you can either pay to play, you can sponsor, you can advertise, you can build some sort of revenue share or affiliate relationship with those sources of influence, or you can do a more collaborative effort, and by creating content for them, with them, you can show up in those communities, you can show up in those digital watering holes, you can get a column in one of those publications or magazines or whatever it might be. You can show up at the conferences, and that becomes your marketing strategy, right? It's just show up where they are and then whittle it down to what are the most effective ways to show up to make a compelling case to those people. And now you've got a marketing plan.
That I love that you just went that deep on it. And the other thing is, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, what would I do if I was this? And I made this list, and it's a bunch of stuff that you just said. Basically,
yeah.
It's
Great.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure you covered cold. Like I thought of cold email, cold calls, cold LinkedIn outreach, right? So that's one. You mentioned in-person events because with tiny seed companies and even with MicroConf companies, like there are folks who are targeting legal, who are targeting insurance agents, who are targeting small private movie theaters that are not corporately owned. Just this, they're not online really. And so these are the things you have to do. In-person events, there's usually a trade event. There's a few during the year. SEO you mentioned. Partnerships and biz dev is another one that I think is probably underutilized in a lot of these spaces. Someone somewhere has these folks' ear. Like lawyers, you and I wouldn't know this, but there's a website called The Lawyerist, and it is this big education brand. They have courses and they have stuff. The only reason I know is I know the founder. He lives in Minneapolis. We hang out. We have lunch sometimes, but now that I know that, every time I talk to someone in legal software, they're like, "Oh yeah, The Lawyerist. We know that." So, can you write for The Lawyerist? You can sponsor The Lawyerist. There are trade pubs. Are there agencies that do marketing work or web work for this space? Again, if it's lawyers or if it's home improvement contractor, like who has at least 10 or 20 of those on their list? Thousands would be great, but who has at least a few, and how can you gather those people? That's what I'd be thinking about it. That's a good question.
Yeah, 100%.
It's one that I don't, we don't often get asked, but I think there are a lot of ways to do it. And it's not Twitter, and it's probably not Google pay-per-click ads. It's going to be, you're going to have to get more creative with it. Let's go ahead. You have anything else to add? Or?
I was going to say, a Swipefiles member actually sells to insurance agents in certain states in the Northeast. And we were talking, we had a call, I meet with every one of the members that I can. And so he's asking me about kind of a marketing strategy. And sometimes it is one of those things where like there literally is no influence mapping that you can do because those people don't pay attention to anything really. They don't go to any conferences. They don't read any blog posts. There are no trade publications. And so, but what we did find out was that all of their sort of, since they're licensed agents in the state, you can find them fairly easily directly. And so in that case, you just, like you said, you just go DM them on LinkedIn, you email them, you find their email address, you send them a postcard and you do some like direct mailers back to them. And that's actually worked really, really effectively. So sometimes even just like the most straightforward, simple marketing strategy is the one that ends up being the winner.
Read The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. If you haven't, I'm not talking to you, Corey. I'm talking to the audience. I'm sure you know most of what's in it.
Read it too.
It's legit. And he talks about finding your dream 100, your dream 100 customers. And you look, maybe for your business, it's dream 1,000. You need 1,000 to, make your number. Whatever it is, he talks about getting that 100 and contacting them, and first you call, and then you email, and then you postcard, and then you lumpy mail. If you've heard of lumpy mail, which is where you send something in an envelope that's a calendar or something, and so it's like lumpy is what they.
Right.
And then you call again, and so you spend a year courting these people, and you're not going to close them all, but they will notice you eventually.
Yeah.
But you have to have the price point. If you're going to go into these spaces, you have to have the LTV or the ACV in order to justify being spending that much time. Questions are pouring in, so I want to cover the rest of your story quickly because we are going to run out of time. I think we're going to push a little long. You have a few extra minutes? Awesome.
I've got as much time as you want.
Cool. So the third step then in your stair step was starting this community for founders and marketers, which is I'm assuming the membership side of Swipefiles.
Yeah. So it's gone through a lot of iterations, I would say. The difficult part about building an online membership, however you want to kind of define that. Well, that's part of the problem. It's really hard to define. Like there is no single model or single best way to do it, single best, product offering or combination of sort of features, if you will, for a membership. And so it's taken me a while to really figure out what does the product market fit look like for an online membership that people would pay for? And I'm still learning that and still making tweaks and still sort of iterating my way to getting closer and closer to what exactly people want and need. But I think it's difficult because you think about SaaS products and software, and it's very utilitarian. Does this thing do what I need it to or not, right? And if it doesn't, then it's not worth paying for. If it does, I will gladly pay, and I will even pay more if it becomes more useful and more helpful over time. With a membership, it's not utilitarian. It's a little bit more of a journey. It's content, it's information, it's empowering in some way, but it's a lot more like emotionally benefit driven than it is just like a strict, here's this thing that helps you, you're picking up a hammer basically with software, whereas you're attending, quite literally like a seminar, right? Or you're picking up a book, or you're reading content that will give you the information you need to go and do the things and learn how to wield the hammer or the saw or whatever it is, the tool that you need. All that to say, I'm trying to build up context to describe all the different sort of iterations that I've gone through. So it started with the newsletter. And basically, I also introduced a paid newsletter version where it was kind of an interesting mechanic that I'm a little bit proud of. I wish that it would have like scaled further, but I just felt like it kind of tapped it out. But I made it so that the latest issue was always free. But then anytime you wanted to access like a previous issue of a newsletter, then you had to pay for access and become a member. And that worked pretty well to get the first, again, 100 members. But then after that, I was sort of like tapping out the potential of the newsletter growth. And I figured, well, with these numbers, if I'm converting, 100 members from, at that time, I think it was about 2,000 subscribers total, then in order for me to get to 1,000, I need to get to, 16,000. That just felt like a long road and a grind. And I was also feeling kind of like being on the hamster wheel on the treadmill, just creating stuff week after week after week and trying to put out my best stuff. And some things would do really well and kind of go a little bit viral. Some things would just fall completely flat. And so anyways, I wanted to find something else. So then I started the community, and the community was going to be now like this added benefit to when you became a paid member of the newsletter, you also get access to the Swipefiles community. And so it's like-minded people. But really there was no like hook in there. And so I spent a good long time, maybe like 8 months, just trying to figure out what else can I add to this? How can I get people from the newsletter to the community to then the courses, which I can upsell. And then I joined a mastermind with a couple other creators. It's about 7 or 8, actually, I believe. We meet once a month. We have some hot seats. And it was in one of those hot seats that I was describing all these things that I'm talking about just how difficult it is to find product market fit and what's the offering and how do I push people back and forth. And they were like, look, we have, after I'd, gone on my whole spiel for about half an hour, they were like, look, it's really, really simple. You need to get back to basics. Why aren't you focusing on SaaS marketing? Why aren't you lumping everything into just one single membership and just going all in on that thing instead of architecting this really big, complex, sophisticated, upsell funnel and all these flows and all these different paths that people are supposed to go down that they're not today? And I was like, dang it, they're right. So I have to go do that. So I consolidated everything under one brand, one membership, all the courses, the community, what was the paid newsletter, but now it's all the archive of the teardowns and everything else I had done. There was a few other like workshops and sort of special like premium piece of content I put in there, all up under one membership. And now it's all focused on SaaS marketing, which is, again, my bread and butter. And I think trying to expand outside of that also ended up hurting me, because then it was a lot of kind of like over planning and over engineering. Like, well, if I write this piece of content, how do I make sure that it applies to SaaS and to e-commerce and to info products and to marketplaces? And it was just like, it's just getting like way too difficult.
It's too much.
I know SaaS marketing really, really well. I can tell you very quickly how this tactic applies directly to SaaS marketing. So that was in September of 2021. And that was like a huge inflection point, because after that, just like the offering, the way that I described it and sold it become so much more simple. It wasn't like, well, I have a newsletter and there's a paid version and a community and I have these courses and I have this coaching component. It's like, no. It's a newsletter and it's a membership. Even though that's like still a little bit difficult to define, it's a newsletter and a membership for SaaS marketing to help you grow your SaaS business. That can be for founders, that can be for marketers. I get pretty much dump everything I can into that thing, but there are courses and everything is revolving around that single value proposition, right? Of this is what I will help you with.
Right.
And
it's simplicity and focus that you got. And you found it not only in your product offering, but in the positioning of it. And then in the niche, you're focusing on SaaS now. Like it's like you were wandering around creating all this stuff that was kind of working, and then realized, through your advice from your mastermind, it's like, it's that click, right? Where something clicks and it's like this is going to get me to product market fit, right? I bet you knew it the moment you sat down to like architect and be like, well, I got to rename this. Did it start to feel like, oh man, this is the ticket right here?
Yeah,
Did you know it?
100%.
Yeah.
It was the thing that I had known, but I just didn't want to accept because I wanted to do it my way and just sort of have like all these little things that were independently working because I felt like that would be easier in some way. But it really was working against me and it was working against the business and against my goals. And even like the next step after that was they were like, hey, you got to raise your prices, man. Like $100 a year is an absolute steal. Like they were like, how much value are you creating by helping people grow their SaaS business? And I was like, well, like millions of dollars. You know what I mean? Like if you add a couple $1,000s in MRR to your SaaS business over time, and that growth compounds, we're generating millions of dollars in value, and I'm charging $100 a year. Like it doesn't really make any sense. So then I also created a couple of price increases. Finally got the price to where it is today at $500 a year, which is still, they really wanted me to go to like $1,000, $2,000 a year. I thought, you know what, I'm going to start here. And then maybe once I start to like push against like what's the maximum number of people I can support, then I'll get there. But they were also like, hey, you gotta, you don't have to just do memberships. You can also sell sponsorships. And so that's provided another 50 grand in revenue. You can also do affiliates. So I've now been, incorporating more of that, and that provides another 5 to 10 grand a year in revenue. And now things are humming pretty much. I'm still working out some of the tweaks there, but it feels good to like, like I have product market fit. I can say that.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's one of those things, again, you don't know, you can't really describe it. Like you just know if you have it or not. The whole product market fit discussion is kind of interesting anyways, but especially for an info product, it's just so like ethereal and difficult to put your finger on that you really do have to just, when it's working or not. Am I proud of selling this thing and talking about it? If yes, then I think you have product market fit.
Yeah, I have this new segment on startups with the rest of us. I think it'll start in the next couple episodes.
Oh, yeah,
Every founder comes on. I say, when did you know you had product market fit? And there's a little jingle and stuff. But I'm asking that because every definition I hear of it, even mine is, you've built something people want and are willing to pay for. But even that, it's like, well, yeah, but you can get there early and not have product market fit and still have that. Like it's so hard to define. And so I like to hear, other people's perspectives on it. Mm-hmm. I need to jump into listener questions. They are pouring in. So
let's do it.
Yeah, we can maybe try to lightning round these because I think there's 4 of them.
Okay.
And we are over time, but people are hanging around asking things. So let's do it. So Sem on YouTube says, what would be your advice for an absolute SaaS beginner with strong programming experience? Where should I start? I'll weigh in on that first, and then Corey, you can weigh in. So I would say, Sem, it depends on, do you want to learn marketing? Like, is that something that excites you and you want to add that to your tool belt? If so, I would start with swipefiles.com. I would enter my email there, and then I would, sign up for the paid membership. But seriously, I would educate myself, right? I would be in MicroConf Connects. I would be at, following Corey, Asia, Arangio. Like there are people who know SaaS marketing. But that I will say that is a hard road to go if all you've done is coding to date. And the whole idea of the Stairstep approach is that you have this skill as a developer. So if you were to go build a Shopify add-on, a Heroku add-on, a WordPress plugin, build or acquire any of these things, you already have the software expertise. You don't have to learn marketing. You can just rank well. You just have to learn enough to rank well in their app store. Now, this business will not be a $5 million business, but can it get to 10 grand a month, 15 grand a month, allow you to quit your day job? Yes, I've seen a lot of add-ons, app store apps that apply to Tiny Seed, frankly, that are in the 10 to 50,000 a month range. Now, these are not venture backable crazy startups, but that's not what you want. You want the first step of the stair step, which is to pay, first 2 steps, which is to basically buy out your time. So those are kind of the 2 ways I would think about it. Corey, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I would say you want to know enough to be dangerous and to know what you're looking for, to kind of scrape and claw your way to your first, customers. Honestly, though, I'm maybe in it's maybe like a controversial take in some ways, but I'm of the opinion that you should be working really, really hard in your circle of competence and like in your zone of genius. And I think that one of the things that we forget about in this whole conversation around bootstrapping and building a profitable SaaS business and stair stepping and like building a business that supports your lifestyle is you want to be doing things that you actually enjoy and that you like doing day to day. And my hunch is that marketing probably isn't in that equation of what are the things that you like to do is probably more in the programming, design, architecture, engineering, product work, customer research. And if you don't like doing it, then don't do it. Get a co-founder, get someone who, or again, know what you're looking for so you can go and hire someone once you have some money to work with who can do the marketing for you, like Derek has done with me. And that will make your life a lot easier, a lot more enjoyable. You can work in your sort of circle of competence, your zone of genius. And that way you don't have to compromise. Because, I mean, Rob, you might have an opinion here, but I think that especially for software, there are two very distinct jobs that both require full-time attention, and that is building the software and selling the software. It's really, really hard to straddle and do both of those things. The best advice that I've heard from people who do that, and they're technical founders who are solo founders, is they tell you, do like a week on, week off, where 1 week you're doing programming, 1 week you're doing marketing. You're doing two jobs at once part-time, right? And so that's really, really difficult. I feel like that kind of caps your potential, and also it's kind of a recipe for burnout, I think, for a lot of people. And they might tell you that if you ask them, but I would say, learn enough to be dangerous so you can hire someone and outsource specialists for certain areas that are work or promising, if it's SEO or if it's sales or if it's partnerships or whatever that looks like, or find a co-founder who can do the marketing for you. Trust me, there are plenty of people like me who are not product people who are desperate for an amazing product person, an engineer, a developer. And we're just kind of like flailing around, trying to network, trying to find the right people. They're out there for sure. There are a lot of, charlatans also. You want to be careful of that as well. But there are a lot of people like me who are like, man, if I just had someone to build software, like I can sell the crap out of this thing. And that just makes both your lives really easy.
Good advice. Next question. Matt, in MicroConf Connect, do you think you can leapfrog some of the earlier steps by spending money through a broker like Quiet Light, FE International, or through MicroAcquire? Should you spend money on the earlier steps as well? I'm not sure I understand the latter part of the question. So my take, yes, I absolutely did this. I jumped to product market fit like 4 times because I bought apps, and some of them were really small. I guess Hittail was the biggest one. It was $30,000. So, but that had product market fit. It's just no one was marketing it, and it was buggy as hell, and infrastructure was going down like twice a month. And so I fixed all that and then marketed it, but I didn't have to build something from scratch. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Corey.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because even like the way that you answer it, it's more of a marketing question than it is a product question, right? And so I think from a product standpoint, 100%, you can buy your way to product market fit. You can buy an app that's already pre-built, looks interesting, looks like it has a little bit of traction, and that you sort of already have like, okay, this is a promising idea that we can expand on and build out and we can fix and whatever. But then you actually have to go and market it, right? So I would say for a developer or a programmer, maybe that's not the way that you want to go because you can't like product your way out of that or into growth. You're still gonna have to do a lot of marketing. And in fact, especially if you want to like, depending on the way that you fund it or sort of how you pay for it, like you want to grow so that you have more money to work with, more resources. If you're a marketer, 100%. I mean, I think that's actually, so maybe a couple people I know have gotten into SaaS as they're a marketer. They have good kind of growth chops. Ryan Kolb comes to mind where him and a partner bought FOMO.com. He wasn't a programmer back then, I don't think. And so they use basically like a seller finance loan, where basically they bought it, but then they repaid it over time. And then they use the profits to pay a developer to go and like fix all the issues and build a product. And then they focused on growing it, which allowed them to generate more cash flow to then, reinvest into building the product and expanding from there. A yes and, or a yes,
Yep.
but.
Yep. All right. Next question, Sean on MicroConf Connect. My problem with stair-stepping is I have a successful consulting business. Starting small means focusing on things that are low revenue compared to what I do now, and the time invested can be high, which takes away from consulting. It's a broad question, so kick it to the curb if you want, but I keep wondering how to approach stair-stepping in this situation, or do I just take the hit in terms of time and money and start with something small? So I have thoughts on this. I did this. I had a consulting. I was just a contractor and I had a micro agency and I was billing 120, 150 an hour. And then I was spending time working on stuff that was generating no revenue and it killed me. So a couple things. Number one, you're probably making buckets of money because that's what you do if you're consulting. You should be charging a lot. And if you are, then go buy something. Like that's what I did. My first probably 2 or 3 successes, .NET Invoice and Wedding Toolbox or whatever, I acquired them. Now they were in bad shape and I overpaid. It was 2005, 6. Like there was none of the stuff we have, the infrastructure in place was there. And I, made some bad decisions, but I turned them around. My back was to the wall. I spent 10, 11 grand on .NET Invoice. And I was like, well, I have to make this work now because that's all the money I had in, my bank account. Yeah. So number one, acquire to jump ahead. Or number two, if I don't know if you're solo or if you have a team, because you say it's a business. So like if you have a whole team of people, I would just fork one person off. And I probably would go after an app store thing. That's just it's such an easy opportunity these days. But if you want to be more ambitious, you go after the full SaaS, but then it's like, all right, so now I have one developer working on this, probably part-time as other consulting stuff comes in. Who's going to then market that? Like that's still the thing is like, if you don't know how to market and sell a product, a SaaS product, that's still a big gap. And that's what this step one of the Stairstep can help you with. What are your thoughts, Corey?
Yeah, I'll offer a different interpretation of maybe where he's coming from and say, if he's consulting now, a successful consultancy, then maybe he does sort of what I've done with SavvyCal. I need to go more like part-time. And that way you split your time still paying the bills because you can charge a lot consulting and maybe you're not making buckets of money and you're not living the high life anymore, but you're spending your time on the things that are enjoyable and fun and rewarding and that will pay off later down the road. You can kind of delay some gratification. Or maybe you can productize that consultancy. In fact, I think maybe Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of one of the steps, right, is or one of the options for that second step is you can productize
That's right.
what you're doing manually. And I would say there's a very clear path to like doing something as a consulting function and then productizing that thing and then like SaaSifying that same thing. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you're doing content marketing as a consultant and you're just writing articles, and then you can productize that and you can do a, sort of like an audience ops, Brian Castle play, or even like a content marketing agency. Out of that, you can spin out products, or you can even say, what do we do best? We can build a tool around that maybe it's an AI copywriting tool, or maybe it's some sort of tool to help with SEO. Maybe it's a tool to sort of streamline the processes that you use in your agency to efficiently pump out a lot of content that ranks well in Google, right? And so I think maybe there's steps up from consultancy that can lead you to your end goal of building SaaS or kind of going further up the steps, or you can kind of scale it back and then you can just spend time doing things that you enjoy. And, if you're just optimizing for money, then like don't stop consulting. But if you want to optimize for lifestyle and the work you enjoy and something that does have recurring revenue from a product, then of course you want to build something else, right? Even though you might take a hit financially.
You're going to take a big dip. This is from full-time work to moving to products. Like almost everyone I know, unless you raise funding, you take this hit in income and it can take you years, 2, 3, 5 years to get back to the point where now, I'm finally making as much as I was back then. But you have the freedom, you have purpose, you have relationships, all the things that I talk about. It's the lifestyle, And so if you're I love it the way you said it. If you're optimizing for money, keep consulting. You're just probably going to make more money for the foreseeable future, and versus products, it's going to take a while to get back to that point. All right, last 2 questions, and then we'll wrap. Octavio on YouTube says, my software is in German because I live in Germany, but I want to open it to all countries. So should I have the website in English or translate it to multiple languages? My hot take is I would go English next, and then figure. I would not go like, hey, let's have 6 languages from the start, because you just don't. None of the markets are that big. Like the English market's going to get you the next biggest market, and then maybe it's probably Spanish after that. Depends on what your software does, so it's a little hard for me to answer. But what else do you think?
Yeah, I agree completely. From like a growth marketing perspective, what you'll see a lot of companies do when they're trying to expand internationally, starting with English or like a US-based company, is that they'll literally they'll go to one market, maybe Germany or Spain or France, and they'll get that all set up. They'll figure out like what's the playbook for this country, and then once they figure that out and they feel like they have some traction and things are working well, then they'll go to the next one. So for sure, don't do like more than one kind of country expansion at once, because you'll have too many plates in the air and it'll just be a giant juggling act that you don't want to deal with. But also every country is different. So you can't treat them the same, like, oh, we're just going to expand internationally. Like, what does that mean, right? You have to take each country has its own norms, rules, different cultural ways of, again, if you're doing like the influence mapping exercise, everyone's gonna have like a different mix of like what's normal. How do people normally buy software in that country? It's probably going to differ. Maybe not like a ton, but you want to treat it that way just so you have a very personalized experience. You're making the most of your money. If you're doing the opposite, if you're going from Germany to somewhere else, 100%, I would start with English. You're going to get the US and Canada. Or if you have some sort of inroad with another country, maybe like a neighboring country like France, or even if you want to start with English, but you want to target more like the UK, for example, and you have some sort of connection, some friends, your network is there, then maybe start there. And maybe that's your inroad. But again, go one by one. Don't do more than one at once.
Right. And if he was asking this question in reverse, saying, I have an app in English and I want to, translate it to Germany or to German because I feel like I'm running out of customers or whatever, I would actually give different advice. I would say, don't do that. Usually that's the wrong choice. Usually the English speaking market is plenty big enough. Once if I'm going to translate to Spanish or German, we often think, oh, I just need the app to be translated. And we know how to do that. Localization, globalization, easy enough. But no, then you have to translate your entire marketing site. Are you going to support it via email in that language? Are you going to have a KB translated to that? Are you going to do sales in that language? Are you going to translate all your landing pages? Are you going to run ads in that language? How do you market in that language? It's just even like I can't go on the podcasts in Germany because I don't speak German, right? It's like you can't reach those people. So anyways, that's a different question, but it is something that I get asked relatively often. And
yeah, that's a good point. You really only see like the largest SaaS companies they've tapped out every other marketing channel, every other like sales function. Yep. That's like the very last step is international expansion. And then you see, the HubSpots and the Salesforces of the world. Now they're going and they're building offices in other countries and they're sort of hopping around. They might focus on Europe first and then APAC and then, vice versa. But, yeah, that's definitely a last step, I would say.
Corey Haines, we are way over time, but I appreciate you sticking around to answer those really thoughtful and insightful listener questions. Thanks, everyone in the audience, for asking them. If folks want to keep up with you, you are Corey Haines, CO on Twitter, and swipefiles.com if they want to see what you're working on. Thanks so much for joining me, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's an honor.
Awesome. And thank you for sticking around and listening to that. It became improv at a certain point because there were so many good questions. I didn't want to, normally I wrap pretty hard right at 30 minutes, but wanted to keep going. So a couple announcements before we wrap. MicroConf Growth tickets in Minneapolis are on sale. We have less than 30 tickets available. And today we announced Don Pottinger from Kevi and Languatalk will be delivering a keynote on the extended version of Stairstepping to create a legacy. If you're wondering how to grow your business to 7 or 8 figures, you need to come to MicroConf Growth. microconf.com/growth. And as always, thanks to Hey and Stripe for being our headline partners in 2020, in 2021, and now again in 2022. They're super helpful and they've been longtime supporters of MicroConf. So thanks again for joining me. I'll see you again in 2 weeks, same time, same place.